Good evening, gamers. This video has been a long time coming, I think. Okay, so Season 6 of Overwatch 2 has kicked up old discourse again in full swing. Of course, when Overwatch 2 first came out, we had the whole is 5v5 better or 6v6 better discussion, but for the most part, I didn't see very many strong opinions, except from very poorly informed people who were just nostalgic for Overwatch 1, who would instantly say, man, 5v5 sucks, I wish 6v6 was back, but couldn't actually give a single goddamn reason because they were just saying it for the sake of being like, I have contrary opinion. But now, of course, we've had a good year to play Overwatch 2 since its full release and test out 5v5. And if you count the betas, we've had longer than a year. And now people are really airing out their disagreements with the 5v5 format. A lot of hate for 5v5 is coming out. A lot of love for 6v6 is coming out. And I'm not gonna lie, I am on the 5v5 side.
Just wanted to quickly edit this in post. I just wanted to say I do think I probably started a little bit more on the offensive than I should have been at the start of this video, in fairness, in hindsight. But I'm keeping it because overall I still stand by what I say. I guess I just was a little bit frustrated because a lot of the arguments I have heard from the 6v6 side, I know there are people out there who actually have good reasons to say that they think 6v6 is better, but it does feel like 99% of people, when I see their explanation for why 6v6 is better, they either can't explain it, or it's just like new thing bad, or I will blame this thing that's nothing to do with 5v5 on 5v5. But either way, on with the video. I'll explain myself more as I go on.
But I also want to point out why I find this conversation so frustrating, because even as I defend 5v5, I don't think 5v5 is that much better. I think that it makes some small improvements, but for the most part, while I am going to explain why I think 5v5 is better, I just want to use this video to explain how I honestly think this whole thing is a big fucking distraction from the actual problems with the game. Seriously, it drives me fucking mad how much 5v5 versus 6v6 is used as a scapegoat to sort of mysteriously place all the game's problems people can't explain onto, instead of actually looking at what's wrong with the game and fixing it. Because there are so many issues I see get blamed on 5v5, sometimes with ridiculous reasoning, that just clearly makes no sense. And I just feel like, okay, is this just the scapegoat we blame everything on? Is this the, oh no, my house burned down, must have been Overwatch 5v5? So I'll get straight to the point here. I think that almost all the problems that people blame on 5v5 for the most part, not all of them, there are one or two problems that I do think are genuinely caused by 5v5, but almost all the problems that people blame 5v5 on are really just problems to do with the design of the game as a whole and character design that has been like a continuous problem for years now. And what I'm talking about is damage and healing power creep. People also like to bring up mobility creep, but I actually don't think that's part of the problem, although I do think that exists as well. I'll get back to mobility creep later. Quite simply, healing and damage numbers in this game have gotten higher the longer it's existed. And this has been a problem ever since BAP's release, and yet we still haven't addressed it. And even though it's been a problem for that long, like 4, I actually don't know when BAP released off the top of my head, but I think it'd be more than 4 years ago at this point. So for more than 4 years, this has been an issue. I think almost everything that we see that we complain about when it comes to 5v5 is just damage and healing power creep problems that we pretend are 5v5 problems. Like, a lot of people have been complaining about this meta, even though in terms of pure balance, it's actually pretty good. Like, there aren't any characters that aren't viable right now, and there aren't any characters that are stupid overpowered right now. There are a couple characters that are popular right now, but most of the popular characters like Orisa and Bastion have much lower skill ceilings than a lot of the other options that are less popular, and that means that you can't really push them at the top skill levels much further than they already go when you're just simply a little bit good at them. And so as a result, even the more difficult characters which seem like they're really unpopular right now can actually have the potential to dumpster some of the most popular picks in the game, like Orisa and Bastion, just by simply being really skillful with them. Because you get more benefit for being skillful on someone like Sojourn than you do for being skillful on someone like Bastion. So yeah, in terms of pure balance, the game's in a good state right now, but people are still mad because it isn't in a great state in terms of design. There's been a very common sentiment in this meta that in this meta, either no one dies or everyone dies instantly, and there is no midpoint. You will either die in half a second, or you will live for 5 minutes straight getting pelted by 1,000 bullets a second, and simply your health bar will never go down. And it seems just ludicrous to me that people look at that and go, look guys, it's 5v5. Ooh, 5v5 is making it so people don't die. And it's like, are you serious, man? You don't think it might be the damage and healing power creep? Because, like, I don't even think that's a hot take. I think most people know that damage power creep and healing power creep is a problem in Overwatch. I don't think that's going to be controversial. But it seems like no one connects the dots that, oh, people die really fast or don't die at all might be caused by the fact that people do loads and loads of damage really, really easily, but also do loads and loads of healing really, really easily. It just seems like for some reason that doesn't seem to connect in a lot of people's heads, and I don't see where the disconnect is. Where does 5v5 come into that equation? I've seen a lot of people make it out like, oh, it's because we have one tank now, and that one tank gets all the healing, and now they're just unstoppable. And it's like, well, no. If you had two tanks, you'd have two health pools to worry about, and on top of that, the two health pools of the single tanks combined, even if they had their reduced healths from Overwatch 1, would still be more than the amount of tank health you have right now with one tank. This problem would literally still exist in 6v6, and if anything, it might even be worse. So the idea that, oh, this is a 5v5 problem is kind of ridiculous to me, and I don't understand how people don't see it's just a damage and healing power creep problem. And I think this is getting worse as well, unfortunately. I mean, if we look at the newest support added in the game, you know I wasn't really a big fan of it. And I think it's almost poetic that the meta that ends up being the everyone dies or no one ever dies meta is the same meta in which they add a support who has extremely good DPS capabilities compared to most supports, and also has the single highest healing output on their normal heal ability out of all characters in the game. And I think the only thing in the game that out-heals Illari's heal beam in the entire game is Transcendence. That is how ridiculously fast Illari can heal, just for holding right-click on someone. And so I think it's pretty clear to see, well, there's damage and healing power creep getting even worse. We just got a support that does a ludicrous amount of healing and a ludicrous amount of damage, but doesn't really provide any other kind of utility. We also keep buffing the healing and damage output of other supports. We also keep giving tank even more tools to get even more healing or get even more damage reduction constantly. It really should not be a surprise when we see, oh, look, people are exploding. I don't usually like to come off this aggressive. I must have to admit, maybe I should tone it down a bit, but I just find it really frustrating as people miss the obvious thing right in front of their face and instead blame it on this nebulous, ooh, it's 5v5 somehow is the problem. So what problems did 5v5 actually cause, and what problems did 5v5 actually fix? Well, let's get the obvious one out of the way first, although I don't think it's all that important. 5v5 was an easy solution to double shield. I absolutely don't disagree that double shield could have just been balanced. You know, they could have simply made balance changes to fix double shield instead of switching to 5v5. However, I do think that it was the easier fix to just make 5v5, because they would have to permanently, for the rest of the game's life, make sure anytime they added a shield tank, that whatever their shield was the kind of thing that could only be up less than half of the time, so you couldn't alternate their shield with another shield tank to get infinite shielding. And don't get me wrong, I think that's possible, but I think by doing that, you would make a lot of shield tanks feel very, very weak from then on out. You would feel like, a lot of shield tanks would have to be really shot in the foot, and it would be really difficult and frustrating trying to keep them balanced, and there'd probably be constant little workarounds found that you constantly have to patch around. I think you could do it, but a lot of time and resource would have to be spent into retooling the game so that double shield won't be a problem. So there's the first thing. It fixed double shield, and while you could have fixed it without doing 5v5, it was a lot easier to just move to 5v5. The second one, and oh boy, I know this is going to piss off some people. I play a lot of tank. I originally was a support-only player on console. For the most part, I dipped my toe into other roles. I played a little bit of tank, basically no damage. But then when I moved to PC, much later, I started playing a much more decent spread of all the roles. Support is still my most played with about 240 hours, but I have about 210 hours on tank, and I have about 160 hours on DPS. And again, that's just my PC account. I don't really have access to my old Xbox account right now, so I don't know how much playtime was on that, but it was definitely a few hundred hours. So don't get me wrong, I am a support main, but I mean, my support playtime and my tank playtime is very neck and neck. So I think I can definitely speak on tank issues. Now let me say this. I understand and sympathize that tank feels miserable right now. It does feel miserable. But also, it is just an actual objective fact that tank is still the best role in the game for solo carrying, and if you can't win on tank, it is unironically a skill issue 90% of the time. Seriously, with the amount of playtime I have in both tank and support, I think at this point it's pretty safe for me to say that I do get the feeling that when I play support, it's like, well, I'll give my team everything I've got, and I'll do everything I can to stay alive and stay out of trouble and keep them alive, but at the end of the day, if they don't use the resources I give them, we just lose no matter how well I do. Meanwhile, on tank, it doesn't matter if my team isn't that good, I can simply be good and win. Despite the fact that I have more experience on support and definitely just have more practice on support, despite the fact that Ana is my most played character of all time by a long shot, it is still true for me that unfortunately my support win rate, while still positive, is not that much higher above 50. It's about 51 to 52%. Meanwhile, my average win rate for tanks usually ranges between 57 and 59%. My win rate on tank is a significant amount higher than my win rate on support, despite the fact I have more experience on support. So definitely from my perspective, I have to say, I get the feeling that I can carry on tank. It's just that it feels bad because I'm being focused down by everyone, and because I feel so alone while playing tank, and because it feels a lot of the time like, God damn it, I have to do everything, don't I? But the fact that you are in that position where you feel like you have to do everything, and you have the tools to do everything if you're good enough, means that yes, it is the best role in the game for carrying. And I really do think that that's a product of 5v5. I did not feel like that in 6v6. I still probably would have said that tank has the best carry potential in 6v6, but I think it was by a very small margin. Now I would say it's by a wide margin that tank has more control over whether you win or lose your games than any other role. And that's a good thing, and it's a product of 5v5. Now I know what counter-argument is coming in next. Okay, sure, maybe I can carry better now that I'm the only tank in the game and that I single-handedly decide how much space we make or don't make. But to counteract that, because I'm the only tank, the enemy tank just counterpicks me and makes me miserable. I mean, there are so many tanks in the game that were never meant for a 5v5 format, which just hard counter each other and don't let each other play the video game. I mean, what am I supposed to do about that? I guess I just can never play the tank I actually want to play. I guess I just have to play this stupid rock, paper, scissors counterpick game. Now this one I will own up to. I fully agree this is a 5v5 problem. This did not exist anywhere to near this extent in 6v6. However, this problem, while it didn't exist in the same form in 6v6, the consequence of this problem is that you don't get to pick the tank you want to play a lot of the time unless you want to throw the game. That was still a problem in 6v6, just for a different reason. In 6v6, that was a problem because of tank duos. As much as we look back lovingly on the days of, oh man, I miss playing Ryan Zarya on King's Row. Oh man, I miss playing Genji Tracer, Winston Diva Dive. Oh, I want to go back to the good old days. As much as people, fantasize of going back to that, let's be real. Actually think back at Overwatch 1. How many times did you get a tank duo like that? How many times are you like, oh yeah, let's fucking go, we get to play some Ryan Zarya today or whatever? I personally can only talk from my few months of playing Overwatch 1 before it moved over to Overwatch 2 on PC. But in my experience, a lot of the time people picked stupid tank duos because they just wanted to play whatever they wanted and threw games because they refused to play the tanks that would work well together. A lot of the times I was playing with Hog and Ball Torture. A lot of the times I was playing with, I don't know, Orisa Reinhardt, the good old Metal Rank special. And don't get me wrong, I think if you could theoretically create a version of Overwatch 1 6v6 where magically no one gets forced to play a tank they don't want to play and everyone always plays good tank duos, then 6v6 probably is more fun then. But, I mean, that's not happening. As long as people just come on and want to play a tank and don't care how much they're fucking over their team by picking that tank, and then that forces you to pick a tank you don't want to play for the sake of not throwing the game, as long as that's going to be a problem, which is going to be a problem forever, as long as you're playing with randoms, then yeah, I would say we haven't really taken a step forward or a step back here. We still have the problem of not being able to play the tank that you want to play. Only before, it was because your other tank would make stupid picks and you'd be like, well shit, now I have to play around that. Now it's because, oh, now I can pick whatever I want, but then the enemy tank just counterpicks me and makes me miserable. I know that some people might argue, well, if you were simply good at the game, it didn't matter what tank duo you were running. If you just performed well on your tank, you could make any tank duo work. That's true. However, I know that some people don't want to hear this, but it's absolutely true. The same is true for being counted as a single tank in 5v5. I would at least concede there are maybe 1 or 2 matchups where it's not just a skill problem, it is like actually like miserable and you basically can't win. Things that are like such like ridiculously hard counted, like Reinhardt into Roadhog is a good example. Obviously Roadhog just bullies you forever and that's miserable, and it doesn't matter if you're an amazing Reinhardt, you die there, you're miserable. But I think when it comes to the vast majority of tank matchups in the game, there is room to skill diff them even with some of the most miserable looking matchups. I can say from personal experience in Overwatch 2 when it first came out, and the biggest, most OP tanks at first were D.Va and Zarya. You might remember that I thought D.Va was stronger than Zarya. Now in hindsight, obviously, I was wrong. The popular opinion was that Zarya was stronger and they ended up being right. But I think part of the reason I thought D.Va was stronger was because D.Va has more room for skill expression than Zarya, and I feel like I was getting pretty good at D.Va at that time, and I was finally picking up how to play her well. And I continued to run D.Va into Zarya throughout much of that first season, and you know what? It worked. Because while Zarya does absolutely counter D.Va, D.Va can never win that 1v1. At the same time, D.Va has mobility, and Zarya doesn't. And D.Va also has a lot of skill expression, and Zarya has barely any. So if you're simply skillful and use mobility well as D.Va, you can still absolutely shit on Zarya, it's just going to be an uphill battle. So I would say the same, oh, if you're good you can compensate for it, applies to the current format. Once again, I think we kind of have a new cause of the problem, but we have the exact same problem with no changes. It's not better or worse, it's just the same thing. In fact, once you start taking this perspective, you might realize that the amount of similarities are almost eerie to the current state of the game and the state of the game at the end of Overwatch 1's life. At the end of Overwatch 1's life, people were really miserable with the state of the game. Double shield was extremely prevalent, and that meant that the vast majority of comps were mostly based around just being extremely defensive and bunkery, and it felt like the game constantly punished you for playing aggressive. It felt like dive was just completely gone and unplayable. It felt like the tanks were just existed to be a absolute, like, punching bag for all the damage in the game, all the stuns in the game, all the debuffs in the game, and the only thing that prevented them from being so useless was the fact they were also the conduit for all the healing and buffs in the game. So they'd spend the whole game getting pumped full of nano boosts, heals, nades, sleep darts, frozens, flashbang, and they just wouldn't play the game half the time. They would just have everyone else press all their buttons on them, both teammates and enemies. And it felt like they really didn't have a lot of control over what was happening, because the whole time they're just reading constant stats effects hitting them. And you know, it's funny, despite the fact we quote-unquote removed CC in Overwatch 2, we really have come back to the exact same meta, haven't we? Yeah, it may be on different terms, maybe it's not double shield this time, maybe this time it's Orisa instead, but actually take a step and look back. We've got the same problem, haven't we? We've got a situation where tank feels like it can't walk forward without getting exploded and eviscerated out of existence, where tank feels like it's just a battery and a punching bag for every single ultimate that both your allies and your enemies want to use on you, and it feels like you just exist to take hits and get punished just for breathing. Meanwhile, a lot of other people who want to play more aggressive characters and flanker characters feel kind of miserable right now, because it feels like the tools in the game are way too good for, like, you know, punishing flankers for trying to be aggressive. It feels like the game punishes you for trying to make plays and rewards you for standing still and waiting for things to just go your way. Hell, even the more recent talking points about support being OP, we've circled right back around, haven't we? Because Brig Zen was stupid OP at the end of Overwatch 1's life, and we were talking about how broken those supports are. All that's changed is which supports we're complaining about, but it's the same thing of supports feeling unkillable, of supports feeling like they've got way too much power in their hands. We've really come full circle once again. We are literally in the exact same meta we had at the end of Overwatch 1's life. Only the cause of the problem is different characters in different circumstances, but the problems themselves are the exact same. Now, all that being said, do I think we've made literally no progress? No. This is where I go into what I think 5v5 actually improved. I think that 5v5 at least made it so that playing support feels a little bit less like leaving yourself up to, like, you know, the whims of fate. You know, I really feel like just relying on your off-tank to protect you in Overwatch 1 was kind of miserable on support. Because if you've got a good off-tank, then you'd have a free game where you just get to dominate the whole time, even if you're not even that great of a player. But if your off-tank was not paying attention, or just simply was bad, then you would have a miserable game, even if you were a good player. It really felt like your skill really didn't matter that much when it came to support in Overwatch 1. And it was mostly just about, okay, can my team actually maintain the space we have so I can keep doing my thing? Or am I just going to get obliterated any single time anyone wants to come up to me? In Overwatch 2, it really feels like supports have a lot more tools to fight people off and actually win those duels. And that means that supports no longer have to just simply cross their fingers their off-tank is paying attention, because they are their own off-tank. It's just that, obviously, they have to put in a bit more effort to prevent themselves from dying than an off-tank would have in Overwatch 1, because in Overwatch 1, not dying as a support was just Zarya turns around and gives you a bubble, or Hog turns around and hooks the person trying to kill you, and that's that. Whereas now it's like, okay, I've got to land the sleep dart as Ana, or okay, as Alari, I've got to make sure I use Outburst, get to my healing pylon, and then land a headshot body shot on them. Obviously, it's a little bit more effort on the support side of things. And I think a lot of people are mad about this, because now they don't get the chance to get those free kills and supports whenever the off-tank isn't paying attention. But I mean, ultimately, I'm going to argue this is far more fair than it was before. Again, before it was either you skilllessly get prevented from getting the kill because the off-tank is paying attention and presses a single button, or you skilllessly get the kill because it's a free kill because the support can't do shit to you. So I think support has been made more fun by the move to 5v5 once they made the adjustments after the first beta so that supports weren't just getting bullied all game. Because if you weren't around for the first beta of Overwatch 2, if you want to know what supports would have been like if they were just like Overwatch 1 with almost no like extra upsides and they just got plopped into 5v5, you definitely should have played that beta. Jesus Christ, that was a miserable beta for supports. No one wants to play support that beta. The other thing that I think 5v5 helped with is, well, I guess not directly 5v5, but in Overwatch 2 in general, with the move to 5v5, they removed almost every single stun in the game, of course, because they knew that tanks were sick of getting chain stunned in Overwatch 1. And while we still seem to have gotten almost the same circumstance, and I partially blame that on them slowly creeping CC back into the game as if they haven't learned their lesson, but there are other things causing that problem as well. While it is the case we're kind of in the same spot, I think it at least doesn't feel as bad as it did in Overwatch 1, because, well, exploding on the spot out of nowhere is at least a little bit better than exploding slowly because you couldn't even press a button the whole time you were dying. Don't get me wrong, they both fucking suck, but one's at least a little bit better because at least you can, you know, just have it be over and done with rather than sit there knowing you're going to die and knowing there's nothing you could possibly do about it no matter how perfectly you handle the situation.
I just want to make one quick addendum. This was kind of on the tip of my tongue a lot of the way through this conversation, but I never quite said it and I should have put it in somewhere. This might not be the best place, but there isn't an easy place to slot this in. I want to make the point that I think that to some extent, unless we fix the damage/healing power creep problem, this is literally just going to go on forever. I don't think just changing current characters that annoy people and make it miserable to play tank is going to suddenly fix tank, because it seems like we've already tried changing everything multiple times before and then we end up right back where we were before. I think the way that we got here is that we did identify some real problems, fix some real problems, and then people just figured out how to recreate the miserable situations those problems caused in new and different ways. I think making tank miserable is unironically the actual optimal way to play the game. That's what I'm starting to become convinced of, and I think that's why tank so consistently is the problem role in Overwatch. Tank gets to control so much of whether the game ends up being lost or won, more than any other role at the very least, and so they have to be dealt with. But because of that, they get hard focused by everyone, and all the resources are put into making them miserable. We thought it was stuns that was the problem, and don't get me wrong, it was definitely part of the problem, but we remove stuns, the game is better, but what do we have? The same problem even without stuns. Then we just get the one-shot meta, and then the one-shot meta finally passes, but we start sneaking in a little bit more CC, and we start steeping in some healing creep, and now we have this meta, where we have a bit of a mix of both the one-shot meta and a meta where no one dies. And this just creates the situation where half the time you're back in the one-shot meta, where your head gets blown off before you can even walk out, even as a full health tank,
or you're in this new meta where actually you can't even walk forward at all because the enemy tank is unkillable, and if you walk forward, you'll suddenly enter Season 2 one-shot meta and get destroyed. Whereas if you just stand still and wait for things to happen, then you won't get exploded, and then you won't have to die to the one-shot meta garbage, and yeah, you're back to, yeah, you can play the game okay, but you have to stand still basically all the time just waiting for your opening, and then maybe you can slowly step forward and maybe get away with it. This is a little bit all over the place, as you can probably guess, but I think you're hopefully getting what I'm getting at. It seems like even if we snapped our fingers now, and we made it so that, I don't know, certain characters that people think are like the main problems, if we just snap our fingers, Bastion's gone, okay? Snap our fingers, I don't know, Sojourn's gone. I don't know if Sojourn's really a problem, but like, Sojourn. Just generally characters people think of that as like characters that do ridiculous amounts of damage and melt tanks. Hey, even Mei, why not throw that in there? If we could snap our fingers and just say, all these characters that melt tanks are gone now, I don't think this problem would go away. They'd just find a new way to create the same circumstances for tank. Because at the end of the day, it kind of seems to me like the reason we keep getting this situation is because creating these circumstances that make tank miserable is creating the circumstances for optimal play, unfortunately. And again, I think that removing healing and damage power creep is the only thing that can fix this, because tanks only control so much of the game because healing is so extremely powerful. And at the same time, they only need so much healing because damage is so incredibly high. If you start taking some healing out of the equation, then you get some room to start taking some damage out of the equation. Once you get that back down, maybe all the roles start to equalize out and start to feel a little bit more on the same footing.
So, okay, enough about complaining about problems. What are the solutions here? Okay, solution number one. This is like one of those ones that's really simple, but in practice, it's actually probably going to be one of the most difficult ones if we want to take this path. This whole problem has been caused by damage power creep and heal power creep. So what do we do about that? Literally just universally reduce the healing and damage numbers in the game. I think that's a good first step. I think that is a good path to try and fix this all. Now, don't get me wrong, that sounds all well and good when I just say it like that, and as simple as it is, I genuinely think that would work. The problem is, how do you do it? It sounds obvious at first. We'll just make, I don't know, maybe say every single person in the entire game does like 20% less damage now and 20% less healing. How about that? And that sounds all well and good until you realize, hang on a minute, we got some characters with very important breakpoints. Do we want Cass to have to 4-shot people? Do we want Anna to have to 4-shot people? Do we want Widowmaker to no longer be able to one-shot kill with her headshots? Maybe we make it so that Ashe has to get 3 shots to get a kill now. You know, it's like, there's so many like breakpoints you've got to worry about if you do that. So this is why I say this one is the simplest in concept, but the hardest to do in execution. However, I think it's the most likely way out of this problem. I really do think damage and healing numbers have to come down at some point, otherwise we're going to be playing this game like this forever. This will only get worse the longer the game's life goes on, if we continue at the current path of just slowly inflating the numbers over and over. I don't think power creep on its own is a bad thing, and I think a lot of the time it's used as a scary buzzword, as just like, ooh, things got stronger as time went on, it's power creep, it's bad! Especially in card games, I see power creep misused a lot, but I have to admit, I think in the context of Overwatch, it's actually appropriate. We have a power creep problem, and we need to fix it. Power creep can be fine if there's a little bit of it. It doesn't drastically shuffle the game's balance around, and it encourages people to want to play newer characters or newly changed characters more for the sake of shaking things up a bit. A small level of power creep, I would argue, is even healthy, because even if you never ever directly upgraded a single ability in the game, you simply gave people new things they could do that they could never do before, you're still increasing the base power level, because it gives the opportunity to people to use the perfect thing for the perfect situation more often, which makes them more powerful. There is no way you can really stop a game from getting a higher level of power the longer it exists, as long as that game keeps getting new content. So I think a low level of power creep is healthy, but the level of power creep we've got in Overwatch is clearly not healthy. So damage and healing numbers need to come down. Now besides that, some people also bring up the point of mobility creep, that people have also gotten the ability to move around more quickly and more effectively in the game as a whole the longer the game has existed. And this is absolutely true. There's a significant amount of characters that didn't used to have the mobility they do currently in the game, because in one small patch they decided to give this little speed boost or this little new movement ability, or this little bonus to this movement ability that already existed, and before you know it, everyone's moving faster than they used to in the past. And don't get me wrong, that's definitely true, and it's definitely something that we should be kept an eye on, and it could get to a bad spot. But I'm not gonna lie, despite the fact I'm a ball player, and a lot of the time it's ball players who bring up mobility creep as a problem, I've got to say, I am not in favor of reducing the mobility of characters in this game. Let's be real, mobility practically has a direct correlation with fun and skill expression. Taking away mobility from characters makes them less fun and less skill expressive. And let's be real, when we actually look at the kind of characters that have been, proponents of mobility power creep, characters that have gotten stronger because they have gotten more mobile as the game has gone on, almost always the changes they got were severely necessary and made the characters both far more fun, and without those changes, a lot of the time the character was extremely underpowered. A perfect example of that is Ramatra. A lot of you may not even remember this, or maybe a decent amount of you don't even know this. Even though Ramatra is quite new, when he first released, for the first 2 or 3 weeks when he came out, launch Ramatra was the worst tank in the entire game. Which probably sounds ridiculous to you, because Ramatra's consistently been one of the best tanks in the game ever since he was added. How could he have been the worst tank on launch? What was so different about him? This was before a lot of other nerfs as well. This was back when his ultimate could last literally forever, if you wanted it to. Do you want to know what made him so bad? It was one simple thing. One change they made in one quick hotfix patch instantly made him good. And that change was that before, in Nemesis form, Ramatra used to move a little bit slower than the normal walking speed. And then they buffed him so that he moved a little bit, tiny bit faster than the normal walking speed in Nemesis form. That one change, just giving him a tiny speed boost while in Nemesis form, instantly catapulted him from being the worst, most unplayable tank in the game to one of the most consistent tanks in the game. I wouldn't say the best necessarily, because I don't think he ever has been the best tank. I'm not sure. I didn't really play in Season 5, so I don't know if he was in Season 5. But he's always been one of the best ever since. So, if we're complaining about mobility creep, do we revert that change? And do we just say, hey, Ramatra, we know that loads of people love playing you. I know that almost no one finds Ramatra to be extremely annoying to play against, and he's generally considered to be a very fair and fun tank to play as and against. But hey, how about we just dumpster you and make you F tier because, mobility bad? You can see why I think that while mobility creep is a real problem, and while it's something worth keeping an eye on, in practice, if we talk about reducing mobility creep, we're talking about making the game worse, almost objectively. So, I don't think it's really the solution here. I think we focus on the damage and the healing numbers and make sure they get knocked down. Now, I have a second solution aside from just reducing damage numbers or healing numbers that would be much easier in terms of, I think there are less ways you could fuck this up. But the problem is that this method of going about things, it's going to be one of those things where if it happened, I will be really happy, but I don't see such a drastic change happening to a game like Overwatch so late into its life. That is that anti-heal needs to become a widespread common mechanic that multiple characters have access to the point where it's almost every game you have at least one character on your team who has some kind of anti-heal ability. And I just want to add on to that I think that it shouldn't just be 100% anti-heal all the time like it is with Junker Queen or, Anna's Nade. I think a lot of these mechanics should be partial anti-heal, like 50% reduced healing, 40% reduced healing, whatever. But that they should become a common and widespread mechanic. And I honestly think that would fix a lot. You see, before I get into the nitty-gritty of this, I want to talk about another dynamic that I think kind of is a bit miserable about the game. I agree right now with the talking point that supports are really strong. I think ever since the release of Overwatch 2, supports have been the source of most of the game's power. I think that supports, literally in terms of flat power level, are objectively the strongest role in the game, and I think they've only gotten stronger as long as the game has gone on. So I agree that supports are crazy good right now. But at the exact same time, playing support does not feel like, oh my god, I'm playing a crazy OP character. It feels like, oh my god, I'm just a fly on the wall watching this game happen, and if people use my resources, then I guess we do great, but if people don't use my resources, I guess we just fucking roll over and die then. A lot of that comes from the fact that healing is where 90% of the power of supports are, and healing is not difficult on basically every character in the game. As a result, playing support ends up being something where it feels like your skill doesn't really factor into the equation a whole lot. Because, well, you could be really, really skilled at Ana, and you could be able to do crazy nades and extremely good long shot like sleep darts, but at the end of the day, if what you need to do to win is pump your Orisa full of 10,000 heals so that she can just be immortal, and if you're going for all these crazy nades in the backline or whatever, and no one's pushing in and taking advantage of them, even though they could easily sweep the enemy team if they did, then despite the fact that you there as that Ana are expressing more skill than a heal bot, the heal bot would get more done. As a result, as I say, it feels like support is in this frustrating spot where I agree with people as they say that support is stupidly strong right now in terms of flat power level, but I still think support has the least carry potential out of the 3 roles. Because while support is extremely strong, their strength is just their healing, and they don't get to use their healing. The tank gets to use their healing for the most part, and a bit of the DPS. On the other hand, because supports are the source of a lot of the team's power, it's just that power gets given to other players. It means that, well, the tank is in control of most of the team's resources, which is why they're the best for solo carrying, and DPS are also pretty good for solo carrying, because a good DPS is going to kill the enemy supports, and by killing the enemy supports, they make the enemy tank useless, because they don't have any resources to work with when our tank does. So I know this is a bit of a sidetrack, but I just feel like I need to explain this before I get into why anti-heal needs to become a common mechanic. Because quite simply, I feel like a lot of people, know healing is strong, but don't truly conceptualize how 99% of your value as a support in the game is healing. And it's kind of sad. Seriously, a lot of the worst Kirikos I see aren't actually bad at the game. They just love throwing kunais and have no idea when they should throw Ofudas. It's a very common issue. A lot of supports that end up throwing games, again, it's not even necessarily a skill issue. A lot of the time they just simply think, I'm bored of healing, let me go be a DPS or whatever, and then they give up their healing and then, oh, never mind, we lost because of it. And I hate giving out this messaging, because at the same time, being a heal bot, you will never climb unless you just simply get lucky. Because being a heal bot just means that you're going to be praying that your teammates are good to win. But at the same time, again, you get so much more value as support by being a heal bot than just by, going for aggro plays. So obviously there's a balance. I'm not saying don't go for aggro plays, but, as long as you have someone to heal, and as long as the person you'll heal resources effectively, you get to do so much more as a support just by heal botting. Healing just simply outpaces damage in this game, and so you're just getting more value. And I just think that's fundamentally a bad thing. I do not think it is good for the game for healing to be able to so severely outpace damage while also being something that does not take skill. I understand why it is. I know there are a lot of low-level players who like playing support, who also don't like the idea that they could be blamed for missing their healing or whatever, and they don't want to worry about that stuff, and I imagine that's a big reason why almost all healing mechanics in this game auto-aim, or if they don't, have other mechanics that make them much easier to land or work with. But honestly, I'm not a fan of it. I want to see more healing that takes skill. I want to see more new ways to heal with support that's actually challenging. Hell, wouldn't it actually be nice and refreshing for once to have a new support where the healing is actually the most high skill part of their kit? Wouldn't you love to see that? But let's be real, that's probably not going to happen. So getting back to the point at hand, anti-heal mechanics. This is why I think anti-heal mechanics would be great for this game. Because it will break these stalemates where it feels like the tank is absolutely invincible. The reason we have damage power creep is as a response to heal power creep, and we have heal power creep as a response to damage power creep. So it's an infinite cycle where we just keep making things worse, and that's how we've ended up here, where it's like, man, people are dying too fast? Better make people heal faster. Man, people aren't dying? Better make people damage faster. Man, people are dying too fast? Better make people heal faster, and we just keep getting worse and worse with this. So how do we break this stalemate? Anti-heal. If you have anti-heal as a broad and common mechanic that almost everyone in the game has access to, or at the very least enough characters that at least one teammate is almost always going to have an anti-heal ability, then you can finally break these stalemates with tanks. And what drives me mad about this is they've already experimented with this before, they just haven't added it into the game. They did an experimental patch at the end of Overwatch 1's Live, where they made Reinhardt's Fire Strike apply a 90% anti-heal on hit. And I think that was an amazing change, and I'm so sad that it was just for that experimental patch and then they threw it away. you need anti-heal to break these stalemates, otherwise you get these boring tank fights where both tanks are just fucking invincible and will never die, and then when they finally die after 3 minutes straight of non-stop firing at each other, they don't even know that they died or how it happened. It's just like, okay, I'm full. Oh, okay, I just suddenly lost 3,000 health in 2 seconds. What happened there? I'm sure many of you have heard of Paladins. It was kind of known as like bootleg Overwatch for a while, but it was free to play before Overwatch was. Of course, now Overwatch is free to play. It's got a bit of a smaller player base now, but either way, I've obviously given Paladins a shot. And while I definitely prefer to play Overwatch overall, Paladins definitely has a few ideas that I feel like Overwatch should definitely take some notes from. And I think the biggest one is that Paladins has a mechanic called Cauterize. Now personally, I wouldn't have Overwatch copy the Cauterize mechanic exactly. There are some issues I have with it, but I'll explain what it does. And yes, before anyone in the audience points it out, it has changed over the years. I'm just explaining how it works currently because I don't want to overcomplicate this, because already I'm pretty sure a good amount of these people watching know what Paladins is but hasn't played it, so, you know. Cauterize is a mechanic in Paladins where anytime anyone takes damage from any enemy, they have, I think it's 0.8 seconds of not being able to get full healing. They take reduced healing during that time frame. Now, the percentage reduction of healing they get for that 0.8 seconds is dependent on how long the match has gone on, which is the one part of this mechanic I don't like. At the start of the match, I think it's a 5% anti-heal, so it practically doesn't anti-heal at all. But at the end of the match, it's a 95% anti-heal after I think it's 10 minutes if the match is still going. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not a fan of that, because it means that supports are broken in Paladins at the start of the game and then nearly useless at the end of the game, where you practically can't heal anyone that's ever been hit by anything in the past second or whatever. So yeah, I must admit I don't like the whole having it scale over time aspect of it, but I do think a basic mechanic in Overwatch where anytime someone gets shot, they receive half healing for like 1 second until that anti-heal effect passes, that I think would be fine. I don't think it's realistic, but I would like to see that in Overwatch. Now, obviously, because I don't think it's realistic, I think it'd be more realistic to simply give anti-heal mechanics to multiple already existing abilities. I've even already outlined a couple ways you could make this work. Like, already, but without even talking about healing in that video, in my previous video about one-shots and Widowmaker, I said that I think the best way you could balance Widowmaker so that she still felt like a similar character in playstyle, but she felt a bit more unique and she felt a bit less bullshit to deal with, would be to make it so she can no longer one-shot headshot, not even with a mercy pocket, but her headshots would apply anti-heal. Already, I mentioned that in an experimental patch they already tried giving Reinhardt's Fire Strike anti-heal, so you could do that too. Hell, I mean, to me it seems like they don't know what they want to do with Cass's Magnetic Grenade, so why don't they make that anti-heal too? I would be fine with that if it's like a 50% anti-heal, but you can still receive some healing. Sojourn's Disruptor Field, maybe make it so instead of dealing damage in that area, you can't be healed until you leave. You can see what I mean here. There's so many mechanics in this game they could easily add anti-heal to. Yeah, I don't think it's super likely this will happen, but I absolutely think it could be done. It's just if they choose to do it or not, which again, I don't really think they would, but if they did, I think this would definitely improve the game significantly. It would resolve so many stalemate-y kind of fights, which just feel like they go on forever. And as a direct result of the fact that we no longer have these stalemate-y fights where it feels like tanks are unkillable and invincible, we then wouldn't need damage power creep in the first place, and we could start toning down the damage output of a whole bunch of the game's characters so that we actually get them in a nice, fair, and balanced spot. And as a support player, I would like to see that. I actually want more anti-heal in the game as a support player, not even necessarily because I think I would be the one getting anti-heal, because obviously Anna has Biotic Grenade, but also because I feel like then support wouldn't have to feel so miserable. It feels so miserable sometimes playing support, because I don't even disagree with all these tank players who hate me for being a support player and all that, even though I also play tank, and say like, oh my god, you get all the tools in the game, oh my god, I can't do anything without my supports, oh my god, I don't get to make decisions because my supports are just the puppet masters and I'm the puppet and I don't get to do anything. And I don't think you're like 100% wrong with anything you're saying, but at the same time, I don't feel in control of this game either. And I feel like this whole frustrating dynamic where tanks feel like they're at the whims of their supports and supports feel like they're at the whims of their tanks would really be helped a lot if healing still existed, of course, but no longer felt like the source of 90% of support's power. If they could get it to a spot where healing becomes a judgment call thing, rather than a if someone is hurt, you basically always do it kind of thing, where it's like, okay, I'm gonna start healing them. Okay, they used partial anti-heal. I could still keep healing them maybe, but I get significantly reduced value. Maybe I get more value if I, instead of trying to heal, go for like an aggressive nade here or a sleep dart on the person pushing my tank, because I can't heal them that much right now. Stuff like that I think would really, really help support become a whole lot more exciting. As well as that, although of course we're not exactly a big fan of Immortality Field here, as a side note, Immortality Field became a whole lot more disappointing in Overwatch 2. Obviously it still gets its use every now and then, but it's kind of funny how in Overwatch 1 it was the most broken part about Baptiste, and in Overwatch 2 it's probably the single least broken part about Baptiste. Even Regen Burst is now way more broken than Lamp is, because it gives him ridiculous like survivability in Overwatch 2. Before the most recent nerf, with Regen Burst, Baptiste's effective HP, as long as you used it at the right time, was 400. With Immortality Field, his effective HP was a minimum of 550, often more than that. He was unironically a DPS, tank, and support all-in-one character before his most recent nerf, and even with the most recent nerf, his effective to HP is still through the roof as a support, as long as he uses his abilities to stay alive. So I would like to see a Baptiste who maybe isn't so ridiculously tanky, but gets a bit more use out of his Immortality Field, because he isn't always just being a heal bot to his tank whenever he's trying to keep them alive. Sometimes it's, oh, my tank is anti-healed, I can't even heal them that much anyway, let me drop an Immortality Field down for him to save him then. Clearly, anti-heal would do a world of good for this game. It would not only mean that supports are no longer rewarded for heal botting and punished for actually wanting to make their own plays, but it would also mean that we wouldn't need damage power creep to kill tanks anymore, and as a result, tanks wouldn't have to deal with just exploding on the spot out of nowhere because they're getting way too much pressure from way too many people whose damage is through the roof to compensate for the fact that otherwise they can't outpace all the healing they get. This is how you fix the current state of Overwatch, not going back to 6v6. I know it's never happening, but if we go back to 6v6, we are coming full fucking circle all the way right back to double shield. We're going to go all the way back to defensive comps being the strongest way to play, to constantly punishing and making flankers cry for daring to make an aggressive play by stunning them and surrounding them with shields and damage mitigation abilities so that they can't get a single kill while the Brig just beats the shit out of the Genji who tried to kill their Zen. We'll be right back to, oh no, I'm getting hit by a million CC abilities at once a second just because I decided I wanted to play tank today. And we'll be right back to, oh shit, I can't play the tank I want to because they locked this tank with this team. Jesus Christ, what do I do now? I think this is why I tend to bounce back and forth really aggressively, not intentionally, between really dogging on Overwatch and then also defending it quite heavily. Because I feel like the main reason I sometimes really passionately want to defend the game isn't even because I'm like, no, Overwatch is perfect actually, and you're bad, and you're stupid. Although I do think it's overall a very good game, and you know, it just gets shit on a lot because, I mean, it is frustrating, of course, and people want it to be better. And it easily could be better if they put in more effort. But at the end of the day, I think the reason why sometimes I feel so passionate about wanting to defend it, despite the fact I also see the same problems, is because a lot of the times when I want to defend it, it's not because like I need to defend the honor of Bobby Kotick. Oh yes, love Bobby Kotick. He definitely makes me happy. No, I definitely want that. No. It's because some of the criticism I see of Overwatch, it comes off as actually just brain dead to me. And I'm like, I want to see criticism of this game that's good. I don't want to see people who are just like, new thing bad, change perturbs me. And I know there's going to be a lot of people who are like, I'm not like that. I just think that 6v6 is better because blank. But like, okay, I'm willing to hear out your arguments in the comments, but I just want you to understand where I'm coming from. Because to be fair, I think that I'm at least going to get a decent amount of people to understand this. Do you remember Assault, or 2CP as most people called it? The game mode from Overwatch 1, which everyone hated. You know, maps like Temple of Anubis, Volskaya Industries, Horizon Lunar Colony, that kind of stuff, Paris. Yeah, that game mode. That was the most universally despised and poorly balanced game mode ever to grace Overwatch's servers. And it was removed in Overwatch 2, I'm sure most of you are aware. It was replaced with Push. Now, don't get me wrong, Push is also probably the least popular game mode in current Overwatch 2. Personally, I don't get the hate. I think that the main problem with Push is I think that Esperantia is the only good push map, and Colosseo is and New Queen Street is also I know a lot of people don't like New Queen Street and Colosseo, and some people don't even like Esperantia, which I think is just like, what the hell is wrong with you, man? That map is amazing. Okay, but with all that said, I do think that the maps for Push kind of suck right now, and we need some more, actually good push maps. But in terms of Push, like, as a game mode, what is actually wrong with it? For the most part, it's literally just two-way payload, and, like, payload is the most popular game mode in the game. So, I mean, I say that. I'm aware of the problems with Push. The main one is just a staggering problem. Because when the robot isn't pushing the, like, barricade, when it's just walking, it actually moves very quickly. And because the fact that spawns can move either further or closer to where you want to be, because of where the robot is, it means you can easily get teammates very scattered or lose a lot of ground very suddenly and have a losing game suddenly turn into a winning one out of nowhere, or vice versa, have a winning game turn into a losing one out of nowhere. And it can really feel sometimes like your performance in the game doesn't actually correlate to how well you do in the game. I do think that's a fair complaint when it comes to Push, because it is an issue that happens a decent amount. However, it is also kind of a skill issue. I'm not going to say that it is a full-on skill issue. To some extent, yeah, the game probably shouldn't make a game mode that seems to naturally cause people to scatter so much and makes it so hard to regroup and get your shit together for the next push. At the same time, though, I really gotta wonder, all these people who act like Push is the worst game mode in the world, I can't help but imagine they're the people who run out of spawn and try and 1v5 the enemy team while the rest of their teammates are trying to catch up from behind, telling them to fall back. I can't help but imagine every single time I see people complaining about Push and how unfair it is that that's the kind of person it is. So don't get me wrong, I think that personally, I still think that Control is worse than Push, but I know that I'm not in the majority there, and I see why a lot of people don't like Push. But all that said, there is absolutely no fucking coherent argument for Push being worse than Assault/2CP. 2CP was home to some of the worst maps that has ever graced this unholy game that everyone despised. 2CP was also the most poorly balanced game mode because every single game would either be you can't even touch the point, or you get the first point and then you bowl over the enemy team before they can even regroup for the second fight on the second point. And almost every single game would either go on forever or it would end in 2 minutes. 2CP was an awfully balanced, extremely unfun game mode that people only want back because they miss Hanamura and Temple of Anubis. And I will say, Temple of Anubis is a good map. I'm not actually that sure about Hanamura. I don't know why so many people love Hanamura. I actually don't really like Hanamura. I don't hate it. And hey, I'm not immune to having a soft spot for these maps. I just said that Temple of Anubis is one of my favorite maps in the entire game. And I do think it's sad that I can no longer play on it. As well as that, if I'm going to be completely honest, I know that almost everyone on the planet despises Horizon Lunar Colony, but I'm not going to pretend it's balanced, but I kind of like it. I actually find it one of the most fun maps in the game as well. I guess I just really like maps that have a lot of high ground to work with. So I'm not immune to this nostalgia, but I don't let it cloud my judgment. And well, if you don't know where this point is going, if you weren't aware, only about 2-3 weeks after the release of Overwatch 2, where, by the way, on release, everyone was praising Push. I didn't see a single person saying Push was bad on release. I saw nothing but praise for it. It was only a couple weeks after, suddenly everyone hates it. And everyone literally got to the point where they became so contrarian about Push. So, man, this game mode is garbage about Push, that people were unironically creating petitions to try and remove Push from the game and bring back 2CP. I unironically had people in my quick play games who would join a game and then they go into the all chat and start trying to tell everyone about signing petitions to get like fucking Push out of the game and 2CP back in. And it just makes me think, Jesus Christ, we've gone 2 weeks without 2CP and you want it back. Like, and it's like ridiculous because you know the people who are saying this shit in the game, they bring back 2CP, it will take them 2 weeks minimum for them to ask for Push back. So that's why sometimes in this video, I might come off as a little bit heated, because I know that sometimes I'm going to have to talking past these kind of stupid arguments, which clearly come from people who are just like, new thing is bad. I don't want to actually think about what is good or bad about the game. I don't actually want to fix anything. I just want to like say shit. I just want to be like, man, this is so bad. Man, I hate everything. Man, this is so miserable. Man, they don't know what they're doing. I could easily fix all this if I was in charge. It's just like, yeah, you know, sure, buddy. So yeah, that being said, if you genuinely have like an argument for 6v6 that I haven't listed in this video, then go ahead and let me know, because I'm not even saying that 6v6 doesn't have its merits. Obviously, when people are running the tank duos, you actually won. I think tank duos are more fun than being a solo tank. I just don't think that you would get good tank duos as often as people like to pretend you do. And I do think that, hey, if you've actually got a group of 6 friends and you've got a 6 stack and you're actually all communicating, I actually think that, yeah, probably would be more fun playing 6v6. But, I mean, let's be real, the vast majority of Overwatch players are solo queuing or duo queuing. And so for that specific kind of playing, I think 5v5 is a lot better. With all that said, you know what? I think I might have gone on long enough. Just barely. So, I think I'll leave it at that. This video might end up being spicy, I guess, but no hard feelings, hopefully, to anyone. Okay, actually, if you unironically think that 2CP would be better than Push, then maybe hard feelings, because Jesus Christ, you did not play enough 2CP if you think that. But other than that, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.